Is coronavirus a deep state bioweapon attack on China planned in 2005? In an interview and letter made available in 2010, an anonymous official within the City of London revealed a secret plan supported by high-level Masons to support a biological warfare attack against China designed to cripple its economic growth and growing military power. The biological weapon was to be part of a timeline of both contrived geopolitical events and a natural disaster that would eliminate half of the planet's population. The whistleblower was first interviewed in January 2010 by Bill Ryan from Project Camelot, who released the transcript along with his video summary of the interview the next month. The interview was followed by a letter from the whistleblower to Kerry Cassidy, who made it available through the Project Camelot website on March 19, 2010. Prior to his interview, Ryan was able to confirm the whistleblower's credentials as a former serviceman with the British military who later accepted a senior position in the City of London, which is an autonomous financial enclave within the Greater London. In his interview, the whistleblower described a meeting held in June 2005 involving high-level Masons who were discussing how to put into effect a timeline of events developed by a more senior group of unknown persons. Quote, "From what I heard, they weren't a decision-making group. They were like an action group. They were people who needed to come together now and then to discuss together what needs to be done or what is getting done and what should be getting done. And then they disperse and go back and do what they need to do as a result of these." End quote. The whistleblower explained to Bill Ryan a planned biological weapons attack on China after a contrived limited nuclear war in the Middle East planned to occur sometime before 2012 that involved the direct participation of China and the US after Israel launched a preemptive attack against Iran. Whistleblower. It's in this ensuing chaos of a post-nuclear exchange that these biological weapons will be deployed in such a fashion where there will be no structure, no safety nets for anybody to counter this type of biological onslaught. And it should be mentioned, for those who are not aware, that biological weapons are just as effective as nuclear ones. It takes just a while longer, that's all. Bill Ryan. Yes, now the deployment of the biological weapons following the ceasefire, is that something that happens covertly? Like all of a sudden, people will start getting ill and no one knows where it came from? Or is this an overt weapon deployment that would be very obvious? Whistleblower. I don't think it would be overt because the Chinese people are going to be hit by the flu. So there'll be a worldwide flu epidemic, perhaps with a country like China, or China because China is mentioned being the one that's going to suffer the most. End quote. Thankfully, the predicted nuclear war in the Middle East never happened due to white hats in the US military preventing Israel from launching a preemptive nuclear attack against Iran. According to the whistleblower, Iran had been secretly assisted by China in gaining several nuclear weapons. During the Bush administration, from 2001 to 2009, for example, Admiral William Fallon, head of the US Central Command from 2007 to 2008, famously declared during his Senate confirmation hearing that an attack against Iran, quote, "will not happen on my watch," end quote. Later during the Obama administration, from 2009 to 2017, to his great credit, President Obama resisted powerful behind-the-scenes efforts to give Israel the go-ahead for launching a preemptive nuclear attack against Iran. Instead, Obama participated in high-level diplomatic negotiations that resulted in the multinational Iran nuclear deal, also known as the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, in July 2015 that warded off a possible Israeli attack for years to come. President Donald Trump ended US participation in the Iran nuclear deal on May 8, 2018, and the US and Iran have engaged in a number of subsequent military skirmishes. The most serious was the US assassination of the leader of Iran's Quds Force, Major General Qasem Soleimani, and Iran's quick military retaliation. Fortunately, Trump and Iran's leaders have avoided crossing the threshold into outright war, and Israel has again been restrained from attacking Iran. In his interview, the whistleblower stressed that the timeline of events that were to be activated had to happen in the precise order desired by those that put the plan together. If the events didn't happen in the correct order, then they were destined to fail. This takes us to the present moment where China appears to have been attacked by a bioweapon, which is linked to the rollout of a 5G network in the city of Wuhan. In a previous article, I pointed out the link between 5G and biowarfare and the likelihood that the coronavirus, also known as COVID-19, was a biological weapons attack. Senior Chinese officials have also recently begun promoting the idea that the coronavirus was a foreign-sourced bioweapons attack and have pointed to the US and its participation in the military World Games held in Wuhan in October 2019. However, as former US Marine Corps intelligence analyst and CIA case officer Robert David Steele has declared, President Xi Jinping knows that the real culprit is not the Trump administration, but rogue elements in the US tied to the deep state. The similarity between the events in China and what the whistleblower described back in 2010 is uncanny and firmly implicates the City of London in a deep state attack on China. However, as the whistleblower pointed out, the group of City of London officials was merely an action group. The real culprits behind the planned bioweapon attack were high-level groups associated with elite banking families on the European continent, especially in Italy and the Vatican, working closely behind the scenes with, according to the whistleblower, extraterrestrial entities. The Vatican has long been rumored to be working closely with extraterrestrial visitors, as I have explained in another article. The whistleblower learned that extraterrestrials are much involved in the high-level planning of geopolitical events, as he highlighted in his summary of the planned timeline discussed at the 2005 meeting. Quote, "Let me summarize what was discussed at the meeting. Iran will be attacked, possibly within 18 months. China will come to the aid of Iran to protect its own interests. Nuclear weapons will be used either by Iran or China, with Israel provoking the first use. Much of the Middle East will be laid to waste. Millions will die within a very short period of time. And for some reason, this is here, and I can't tell you why, China will move forcibly into parts of Russia to extend ceasefire lines. Thereafter, biological weapons will be deployed against China. China will catch a cold. And my own understanding is that there's some sort of malevolent ET alliance at work for 50 years by the UK and the US and other Western powers. And this includes Japan. And again, when we talk about a malevolent extraterrestrial alliance, that's in the context of black projects. And this is an exchange of technologies that's been going on for some considerable time. So there is an involvement there. And that involvement I can't fully explain myself. And I also understand that there are more humanitarian and altruistic ET entities working against this timeline and are somehow maintaining a precarious balance without taking any direct intervention themselves. And again, I can't fully explain that, but it's a certain intuitive feeling that this is working, and there's other aspects of my experience that's led me to make that statement. But that's another story. So what we are talking about is the Western powers seeking a perfect war, doing so throughout the 20th century right up until the present day, because this timeline goes way back. So we're talking decades or hundreds of years of time where this timeline has been in use. And also, I think it's quite important to associate the timeline with its other reference, which I've heard several times now. It's called the Anglo-Saxon mission. I feel that's important to add because that may ring some bells with some people, as I don't think it's been mentioned before." End quote. As a result of military white hat and altruistic extraterrestrials, the above timeline never happened. Consequently, what are we to make of the 2020 coronavirus pandemic and the deep state's plan for a biowarfare attack against China discussed back in 2005 in response to the latter's rapid economic and military growth, which continues to alarm Western national security officials as detailed in my upcoming book, Rise of the Red Dragon, origins and threat of China's secret space program. One explanation is that as a result of a global awakening to the machinations of the deep state, the latter's nefarious timeline of events has been derailed. This means that the biowarfare attack against China, planned to happen after a limited nuclear war in the Middle East that would have severely weakened China and many nations in responding to a global pandemic, has instead occurred as an isolated event. Consequently, China and many other nations have been able to use all their national resources to respond to the coronavirus, making it all but certain that it will be eventually contained. China, in particular, implemented strict protocols that appear to have turned the tide in the fight against the coronavirus, as Chinese officials are eagerly pointing out. This takes me to a startling prediction made by the psychic Sylvia Browne in 2008, only 3 years after the City of London meeting, which appears to describe what we are now witnessing. Quote, in around 2020, a severe pneumonia-like illness will spread throughout the globe, attacking the lungs and the bronchial tubes and resisting all known treatments. Almost more baffling than the illness itself will be the fact that it will suddenly vanish as quickly as it arrived, attack again 10 years later, and then disappear. End quote. As mentioned earlier, China understands that it was the deep state rather than the Trump administration that was behind the bioweapons attack. The 2010 revelations by the whistleblower firmly point the finger at the deep state and their accomplices in the City of London, elite banking families in Italy called the Black Nobility, and the Vatican. It's not coincidental that the coronavirus outbreak in Italy, which has recorded the most deaths outside of China, began in the provinces most associated with the Black Nobility and the rollout of 5G, as observed by the blog site State of the Nation. Quote, Northern Italy, especially the international financial capital of Milan and all of Lombardy, have been strictly quarantined because this region is the ancestral home of the all-powerful Black Nobility. Very few are aware, but it is Milan and Venice that really rule the financial powerhouses of London and New York City. They locked down both of those Italian power centers in order to control all movement into and out of the region. This unprecedented quarantine was planned years in advance by way of the purposeful rollout of 5G throughout the greater Milan metro area. In other words, wherever the military deployment of 5G has taken place, the numerous 5G super hotspots will provide a very conducive environment for the coronavirus bioweapon to be released into the population with the desired effect. Just look at where the coronavirus is exploding the most, countries that have the most 5G hotspots. End quote. This raises the possibility that the coronavirus outbreak in Italy may be the Chinese military's retaliation against the deep state's bioweapon attack and the role played by the Black Nobility in attacking China. It appears, however, that the bioweapon attack on China will not have the desired effect as originally conceived in the plan heard by the British whistleblower in 2005. Rather than a key step in a sequence of geopolitical events leading to global devastation, the coronavirus is proving to be an isolated event that is being contained by nations and is raising many questions over its true origins. Ultimately, as people investigate the true origins of the coronavirus and the deep state's plan to attack China, there will be a global awakening, as pointed out by the State of the Nation blog site. Quote, the bottom line here is that March Madness 2020 appears to be the beginning of the end of the New World Order agenda. It really is a do-or-die situation for the power elite now that they have totally committed to staging an unsustainable global pandemic. If they do not have the adequate enforcement mechanisms in place to police this pandemic as they conceived it, they're in huge trouble. Because when the dust settles, every inhabitant of the planet is going to be asking some questions. There are no NIMBYs with this pandemic, so everyone will want answers that will only lead back to the British officer's damning 2010 letter. End quote. Consequently, rather than the coronavirus being part of an elaborate set of events designed to implement a new world order controlled by the international banking elite, through major Western nations, it appears to be a last-ditch, desperate effort by the deep state that is doomed to fail. The exposure of the deep state behind the coronavirus pandemic will only accelerate the exposure and demise of key figures and institutions behind the deep state and an unprecedented awakening of global humanity. This has been Dr. Michael Salla with exopolitics.org. If you're interested in learning more about my work, I recommend an upcoming webinar on March 21st, which is going to be held at Portal to Ascension. The topic is Covert Secret Space Program Disclosure. US Navy patents confirm futuristic space technologies are real. So please visit my website, exopolitics.org, to get more information about my upcoming webinar and other events that I'll be attending over the rest of 2020. Thank you for listening, and please don't forget